Princess Zarathik pressed her scaled forehead against the cold metal of her chamber window, watching the stars beyond the Veltar Imperial fleet. Her reflection stared back, violet eyes that held no fire, silver scales that seemed dull compared to her sister's, and the mark of shame burning on her left temple, the mark of the unworthy. "You're thinking too loudly again," came a voice from behind her. She turned to see Captain Marcus Chen of the Terran Diplomatic Corps standing in her doorway, a cup of that strange earth beverage called coffee in his hands. "Humans shouldn't be able to hear Veltar thought echoes," she said, though without any real accusation in her voice. Marcus had been full of surprises since arriving 3 months ago. Maybe I'm just good at reading body language. He stepped into her chambers, and she noticed how he moved differently than the other aliens who visited her father's ship. Where Veltar moved with rigid ceremonial precision, and the Kethmar delegation slithered with calculated grace, Marcus simply walked. There was something honest about it. The council meeting didn't go well, I assume. Marcus settled into one of her chairs, completely ignoring the fact that she hadn't invited him to sit. Another human peculiarity she'd grown to appreciate. Zarathik laughed bitterly. 3 marriage proposals rejected in 1 day. A new record even for me. She touched the mark on her temple. The families withdrew their offers the moment they saw this. Apparently even my father's desperation to form alliances has limits. Marcus studied her mark with those strange brown eyes. Unlike every other species in the galaxy, humans had such varied eye colors. His were the color of earth soil, he'd told her once, rich and dark. What exactly makes someone unworthy in Veltar culture? The question caught her off guard. In 3 months, no one had asked her to explain it. Everyone simply accepted it as fact. I failed the trials of flame when I turned 18. Every Veltar noble must prove their worth by surviving our ancestral firewalk and defeating a combat drone in single battle. She looked away. I chose to save a servant child who fell into the fire instead of completing my trial. The child lived, but I was marked as one who chose weakness over strength. You saved a child's life. I failed my people's most sacred test. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, sipping his coffee. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. On Earth we have a saying, the true measure of a person is what they do when no one is watching. But I think there's another measure that's even more important. What you do when everyone is watching and you know, you'll be punished for doing the right thing. Zarathik felt something strange in her chest, a warmth she'd never experienced. Humans have many sayings, don't they? We do. Most of them contradict each other. Marcus grinned, and she found herself almost smiling back. But that one I believe in. The door chimed, and her personal aide, Kesra, entered with a low bow.
Princess, your father requests your presence in the council chamber.
The Terran delegation wishes to discuss marriage negotiations. Zarathik's scales went pale. What? Marcus stood, his expression unreadable. I asked to speak with your father about something important. You can't be serious. She stared at him. Marcus, you don't understand what it means to marry someone marked as unworthy. It would end your diplomatic career. Your own people would. My people, Marcus interrupted gently, sent me here to establish meaningful connections between our species. I can't think of anything more meaningful than this, but why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Marcus moved closer, and she caught that strange human scent, soap and something called cologne, mixed with the natural warmth of his skin. Because in the 3 months I've been here, you're the only person who's talked to me about literature, philosophy, and the meaning of honor. You're the only one who asks about Earth not because you want something from my government, but because you're genuinely curious about other ways of life. You're the only one who notices when the servants are tired and tells them to rest. He paused, meeting her eyes directly. And because when I told you about my brother who died in the war, you didn't offer me political condolences. You just sat with me in silence until I was ready to talk again. Zarathik's throat felt tight. Those aren't achievements. Those are just being decent, exactly. Marcus smiled. On Earth we call that good character. It's something we value very highly. The council will never approve it. An unworthy princess married to an alien? It's unthinkable. Then maybe it's time someone taught them how to think differently. Marcus extended his hand to her, palm up, in the human gesture of offering. Will you come with me to face them? Zarathik looked at his hand. Human skin was so strange, soft and warm. without scales or carapace, vulnerable. Yet, Marcus had told her stories of human explorers who'd crossed frozen wastelands and burning deserts with nothing but that soft skin and their determination. Maybe vulnerability could be a kind of strength. She placed her scaled hand in his warm one, feeling the way his fingers closed gently around hers. You realize this might destroy both our futures? Or it might create something entirely new. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. Besides, I've read enough Veltar history to know that your greatest heroes were the ones who broke tradition when tradition was wrong. Together, they walked toward the council chamber, and for the first time since receiving her mark, Zarathik didn't feel ashamed of who she was. The council chamber fell silent as Zarathik and Marcus entered. Emperor Velthak, her father, sat on his crystalline throne, his massive form casting shadows across the assembled nobles. His scales, unlike hers, gleamed like polished emeralds, and his eyes held the cold fire that had conquered 12 star systems. "Daughter," he rumbled, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Captain Chen has made a curious request." Ambassador Thysra of the Kethmar delegation raised her serpentine head, forked tongue flicking out to taste the tension in the air. Most curious indeed. "We were under the impression that humans preferred worthier partners." Marcus stepped forward and Zarathik noticed he didn't bow. Every other species representative in the room had prostrated themselves before her father, but Marcus simply stood straight and met the Emperor's gaze. "Your Imperial Majesty, I've come to formally request permission to marry your daughter." The chamber erupted. General Korthax, her father's military advisor, slammed his armored fist on the council table. "Impossible! The princess bears the mark of the unworthy. To suggest such a union is an insult to the Veltar bloodline. And what alliance could possibly come from such a match?" sneered Lord Vextar, the trade minister. "The humans gain nothing from someone who cannot even complete basic trials." Marcus turned to face the assembly, and something in his posture shifted. Zarathik had seen him relaxed and friendly in her chambers, but now she saw another side of him, the trained diplomat, the man who'd negotiated peace treaties between warring worlds. "With respect, Lord Vextar, you're thinking too small." Marcus's voice carried clearly through the chamber. "You see marriage as a transaction, bloodlines, alliances, political advantage. Humans see it differently." Emperor Velthak leaned forward, interested despite himself. "Explain." "Among humans, marriage is about partnership. Two people choosing to face the universe together, combining their strengths to overcome challenges neither could handle alone." Marcus's eyes found Zarathik's. "We don't measure worth by trials past or failed. We measure it by character, by choices made when the outcome matters." Ambassador Thysra's laugh was like silk scraping against metal. How poetic. But what practical value does this human sentiment hold? Marcus smiled, and Zarathik recognized the expression. It was the same one he wore when he was about to say something that would surprise everyone. "I'm glad you asked. Princess Zarathik, would you tell the council about your agricultural proposals?" She blinked, caught off guard. Those weren't important. Just ideas. Humor me." Zarathik felt heat rise in her cheeks, but Marcus's encouraging nod gave her strength. "I've been studying food production across our territories. We could increase crop yields by 30% and reduce resource consumption by implementing rotational farming techniques used by the Terran colonies." "And your thoughts on our labor shortages?" Marcus prompted. "Well, if we offered education incentives to lower caste workers instead of just demanding quotas, productivity would increase. People work harder when they have something to hope for." She was gaining confidence now, and the civilian unrest in the outer territories could be reduced if we established local governance councils, instead of ruling entirely through military governors. The chamber was quiet now, but it was a different kind of silence. Several nobles were looking at her with something other than dismissal. Lord Vexitar's voice was thoughtful. "These are not uninteresting concepts. Princess Zarathik has spent the last 2 years developing these proposals," Marcus said. "But because she bears the mark of the unworthy, no one has bothered to listen to them. Humans would call this a tragic waste of talent," General Korthax growled. "Proposals mean nothing without the strength to implement them." "She failed the combat trial, did she?" Marcus asked. "Or did she prioritize saving a life over proving a point? Among humans, we have a concept called moral courage. The strength to do what's right even when it costs you everything. He turned to address the Emperor directly. Your Majesty, you've built an empire through conquest and strength. But empires that last, that truly endure, are built on more than force. They're built on innovation, on people feeling invested in their success, on leaders who inspire rather than just command. Emperor Velthak's eyes narrowed. You suggest my methods are insufficient? I suggest they're incomplete. Marcus's voice was respectful but firm. Earth has seen empires rise and fall for thousands of years. The ones that survived weren't always the strongest. They were the ones that adapted, that found new ways to solve old problems. Zarathik watched her father's expression, seeing the calculating intelligence behind his intimidating exterior.
And you believe my unworthy daughter possesses these qualities?
I believe she possesses something more valuable than traditional strength, the ability to see what others can't, and the courage to act on that vision even when society tells her she's wrong. Ambassador Tessera slithered closer. Pretty words, human. But what do you offer in return? What does this marriage gain the Veltar Empire? Marcus smiled. Partnership with a species that survived and thrived despite having no natural weapons, no armored skin, no ability to breathe toxic atmospheres or see in complete darkness. Humans succeeded through cooperation, innovation, and stubborn refusal to give up. He gestured to Zarathik. Your princess has those same qualities. Together, we could show both our peoples new ways to approach old challenges. Emperor Velthak was silent for a long moment, his powerful hands drumming against his throne. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured. Captain Chen, are you prepared to undergo the trials of flame yourself? If you wish to marry my daughter, you must prove your own worth by our standards. Marcus nodded without hesitation. I am. Even knowing that failure means death? Your Majesty, Marcus said quietly. I've already seen what failure means for someone with good ideas and a strong heart. Death would be no worse. Zarathik felt her breath catch. He was willing to risk his life for her, for them, for the possibility of something better. Her father stood, his massive form towering over the assembly. Very well. The trials will commence tomorrow at dawn. If you survive, if you prove your worth, we will discuss this union further. As the council dispersed, Zarathik caught Marcus's arm. You don't understand what you've agreed to. The trials aren't just dangerous, they're designed to be impossible for non-Veltar physiology. Marcus covered her hand with his. Then I guess I'll have to find a way to make the impossible possible. Humans are good at that. What if you die? His smile was gentle. Then at least I'll die trying to build something worth building. Marcus stood at the edge of the fire pits of Veltanor, watching the molten streams that flowed between narrow stone bridges. The heat was intense even from 50 meters away, and he could see why Veltar considered this a test of worth. Their thick scales and natural heat resistance made it challenging but survivable. For a human with soft skin and no natural protection, it was essentially a death sentence. You have 6 hours until dawn, Zarathik said beside him, her voice tight with worry. The rules say I cannot help you, but I can observe your preparations. Marcus studied the course carefully. The firewalk consisted of 3 bridges, each narrower than the last, suspended over lava flows that reached temperatures of nearly 2,000 degrees Celsius. The final bridge was barely a meter wide and extended for almost 50 meters. Tell me about the servant child, he said suddenly. What? The child you saved during your trial. What happened exactly? Zarathik's scales darkened with memory. Her name was Jessica. She was only 12, carrying water to the observation platform. She slipped and fell onto the first bridge during my trial. The rules state that any interruption voids the attempt, but... She paused. I couldn't just watch her burn, so you went after her. I pulled her to safety, but by then the time limit had passed. The council declared my trial failed. Her voice was bitter. Jessica lived, but I was marked as unworthy for choosing compassion over duty. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. And the combat trial? After the firewalk, candidates must defeat a level 7 combat drone in single battle. It's designed to match Veltar strength and speed while testing tactical thinking. She looked at him with desperate eyes. Marcus, these trials assume Veltar physiology. You're strong for a human, but compared to us, I'm about as threatening as a house cat. Marcus finished with a grin. Don't worry. I've been thinking about this problem since yesterday. He pulled out a small device from his pack, a human tablet computer. I've been studying every recorded trial from the past century. Want to know what I found? Despite her worry, Zarathik leaned closer to look at the screen. Marcus had compiled videos, environmental readings, and detailed analysis of successful and failed attempts. The trials test 3 things, he continued: physical endurance, mental adaptation, and what your people call combat wisdom. But here's the interesting part. Nowhere in the ancient texts does it specify that you have to complete them the same way everyone else does. What do you mean? Marcus showed her thermal readings from the fire pits. Look at the heat distribution. It's not even. The center of each bridge is hottest, but along the edges, particularly the right side, temperatures drop by almost 300 degrees. Still hot enough to kill me, but manageable with the right protection. He pulled out what looked like metallic fabric from his pack. Thermal emergency blankets from our shuttle's survival kit. They're designed to protect humans from extreme temperatures in space. Not perfect for this, but combined with my environmental suit. You're going to cheat? Zarathik stared at him. I'm going to adapt. Marcus's expression was serious. Zara, your people value strength and tradition, but sometimes tradition is just an old way of solving a problem. Humans survive by finding new ways. He pulled up another set of data. The combat drone is programmed to respond to Veltar fighting patterns, direct engagement, strength-based attacks, traditional weapon techniques. But what if someone fought it using tactics it wasn't designed to counter? The drone adapts. It learns from combat data. But I spent 3 years as a military engineer before joining the diplomatic corps. Marcus smiled. I know a few things about combat systems that might surprise an AI designed to fight honorable opponents. Zarathik was quiet for a long moment. The council will say you're not fighting fairly. Then they'll have to decide what matters more, following tradition exactly, or achieving the goal the tradition was meant to accomplish. Marcus turned to face her fully. Zara, your people created these trials to test whether someone could protect and serve the Empire. I'm going to do exactly that, just not the way they expect. As the hours passed, Marcus prepared with methodical precision. He studied thermal patterns, tested his protective gear, and ran calculations on his tablet. Zarathik watched him work, amazed by his systematic approach to what most considered a test of raw courage. You're not afraid, she observed. I'm terrified, Marcus admitted without looking up from his preparations. But fear is just information. It tells you what's dangerous, not what's impossible. When dawn approached, they made their way to the trial grounds. The observation platform was packed with nobles, dignitaries, and curious onlookers. Emperor Velthak sat in his ceremonial armor, expression unreadable. Captain Chen, the Emperor's voice boomed across the arena. You may begin when ready. Marcus stood at the starting line wearing his environmental suit covered with the reflective emergency blankets. He looked ridiculous compared to the traditional trial garb, but Zarathik could see the intelligence in his preparation. For Princess Zarathik, he called out, his voice carrying clearly, and for the future we're going to build together. He stepped onto the first bridge. The heat hit him immediately, even through his protection. Sweat poured down his face, and she could see him struggling with each step. But he didn't rush. He moved carefully along the right edge where temperatures were lowest, using a handheld thermal reader to find the coolest path. The first bridge took him 12 minutes, twice as long as a typical Veltar attempt. The second bridge was worse. The protective fabric began to smoke, and she could see him wavering from heat exhaustion. But he pressed on step by careful step. Impossible, General Korthax muttered. No soft skin could survive this. The third bridge was the longest and narrowest. Halfway across, Marcus stumbled, dropping to one knee as the protective blankets finally failed. The crowd gasped, certain they were about to witness his death. But Marcus did something no one expected. Instead of trying to stand and continue, he pulled out a small spray bottle from his suit and began misting himself with water, creating a cooling effect through evaporation. It was a desperate measure that bought him just enough relief to stand and take another step. Ingenious, breathed Lord Vextar, using evaporative cooling to survive the final approach. When Marcus finally reached the end of the third bridge, collapsing safely on the platform, the entire arena was silent. He had completed the firewalk using methods no Veltar had ever considered, turning human weakness into an advantage through pure ingenuity. Zarathik felt something she'd never experienced before: pride. Not in bloodline or tradition, but in watching someone refuse to accept impossible as an answer. Marcus stood, removing his damaged helmet, and looked up at the Emperor. His face was red and blistered, his hair singed, but his eyes were steady. Phase 1 complete, Your Majesty. Ready for the combat trial. Emperor Velthak's expression was unreadable, but Zarathik thought she detected something that might have been respect. Very well, Captain Chen. You have 1 hour to recover before facing the drone. As Marcus was led to the recovery area, Zarathik caught his eye. He was exhausted, injured, and facing an opponent designed to kill trained Veltar warriors. But he winked at her, and somehow she knew that the impossible was about to become possible once again. 3 months after their wedding ceremony, Marcus and Zarathik were aboard the diplomatic vessel Veltaran's Pride, traveling to the Outer Rim territories to implement Zarathik's agricultural reforms. The journey should have been routine, but the urgent message that crackled through their communication array changed everything. Imperial Fleet Command to Veltaran's Pride, came the strained voice of Admiral Kesrath. We have a situation in the Zerion system. The mining colony on Zerion 4 has gone dark. All communications ceased 6 hours ago. Marcus and Zarathik exchanged worried glances from their positions on the bridge. Emperor Velthak's voice came through the secure channel moments later. Daughter, I need you and Captain Chen to investigate. The Zerion colony produces 60% of our rare earth minerals. If we've lost it, he didn't need to finish. They all knew that those minerals powered everything from starship engines to medical equipment across the Empire. Father, we're not a military vessel, Zarathik pointed out. Shouldn't Admiral Korthvin's battle group handle this? Korthvin's forces are 3 days away. If this is a natural disaster or equipment failure, every hour counts. If it's something else, the Emperor's voice was grim, I need people who can think beyond conventional solutions. 4 hours later, the Veltaran's Pride dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zerion system. What they found made the bridge crew fall silent. Zerion 4 was covered in massive storm clouds that pulsed with unnatural green lightning. The orbital stations were dark, drifting without power. Most disturbing of all, there were no signs of life from a colony that housed 40,000 beings. Reading massive electromagnetic interference, reported Lieutenant Thesica from the sensor station. Whatever's causing those storms is generating energy levels that would fry any standard electronics. Life signs? Marcus asked, inconclusive. The interference is too severe for detailed scans. Zarathik studied the readings with growing dread. Those storm patterns? They're not natural. Someone or something is doing this deliberately. Marcus was already running calculations on his tablet. If we try to land using standard approach vectors, we'll lose all ship systems before we reach the surface, but? Zarathik prompted. Human spacecraft are designed differently than Veltar ships. Our electronics are naturally more resistant to electromagnetic interference. We had to build them that way because Earth's magnetic field is much more chaotic than most planets. Captain Veldris, the ship's commander, spoke up. Are you suggesting we attempt a landing? Sir, with respect, those energy levels would kill us all. Not if we modify our approach. Marcus was already sketching diagrams on his tablet. Look, the storm pattern has a rhythm. Every 47 minutes, there's a brief lull in the electromagnetic activity. If we time it right and use emergency power only? That's insane, Lieutenant Thesica protested. Even if we survive the landing, we'd be stranded on the surface with no way to communicate or escape. Zarathik had been studying the data while Marcus and the crew debated. Marcus, look at this. She pointed to energy readings from just before the colony went dark. The interference pattern started small and grew. Whatever's causing this is spreading. Marcus examined the data, his expression growing more serious. You're right. If this continues to expand at its current rate, it'll reach the inner system within days. That includes the agricultural worlds that feed half the Empire. The implications were staggering. If the phenomenon spread to the agricultural sectors, billions could starve. We have to go down there, Zarathik said quietly. We have to find out what's causing this and stop it. Captain Veldris looked between them. Princess, the risk is outweighed by the consequences of inaction, she finished firmly. How many people die if we do nothing versus how many die if we try and fail? Marcus smiled at her, recognizing the same courage that had led her to save a child during her trials. Classic human risk assessment. I like it. Human risk assessment? Captain Veldris asked. Humans are very good at calculating acceptable losses, Marcus explained. We have to be. Our whole species' survival strategy is based on taking calculated risks that other species would consider suicidal. The descent to Zerion 4 was a nightmare of buffeting winds and electrical storms that made their modified shuttle shake like a leaf. Marcus piloted using instruments that flickered and failed randomly, while Zarathik monitored the electromagnetic readings and called out safe windows between energy spikes. There, she called out as they broke through the storm layer. The colony's main complex 2 kilometers northeast. What they saw below made Marcus whistle softly. The entire colony was encased in a shimmering energy dome, but it wasn't protecting the settlement. It was imprisoning it. And at the center of the dome, something massive and alien pulsed with the same green energy as the storms above. They landed their shuttle a safe distance away and approached the colony on foot, wearing environmental suits modified with extra electromagnetic shielding. As they got closer, they could see movement inside the dome. Colonists were alive but trapped, their technology useless within the energy field. What is that thing? Zarathik breathed, staring at the alien structure at the dome's center. Marcus was scanning it with his modified equipment, some kind of terraforming device but not from any known species. Look at the construction. Organic and mechanical components integrated in ways that shouldn't be possible. Terraforming device? It's changing the atmosphere inside the dome, converting it to something with higher electromagnetic conductivity. Marcus's voice was grim. If this continues, it'll eventually cover the entire planet, then spread to others. Whoever built this is trying to make these worlds uninhabitable for most known species. Zarathik felt a chill that had nothing to do with the planet's cold winds. An invasion? Or preparation for one? Marcus studied the device more carefully. But there's something odd about this. The technology is incredibly advanced, but the implementation is clumsy. Like someone reverse-engineered it without fully understanding how it works. Can we stop it? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, running calculations.
Maybe. But it would require getting inside that dome, and I'm not sure anything electronic would survive the energy levels in there. Then we don't use electronics. Zarathik's voice was steady.
We use what we have, Veltar physical resilience and human ingenuity. Marcus looked at her with admiration. You're suggesting we go in there with no technological support? I'm suggesting we do what our species do best. You adapt and I endure. She squeezed his hand through their suit gloves. Together, we might just be enough. They spent the next hour preparing for what could be a suicide mission. Marcus studied the device's construction and energy patterns, looking for weaknesses, while Zarathik tested her people's natural resistance to electromagnetic interference. The dome has gaps in its lower frequency ranges, Marcus reported. If we time our approach correctly and stay low, we might be able to get close enough to the device to sabotage it. And if we can't? Marcus's smile was grim. Then we improvise. Humans are very good at that too. As they prepared to enter the energy dome, Zarathik realized that everything had led to this moment. Her failure at the trials that taught her to value life over tradition. Marcus's unorthodox thinking that showed new solutions to old problems. And their partnership that combined the best of both their species. Ready? Marcus asked. Zarathik nodded. Let's save our people. Together they walked into the storm. The moment they crossed the threshold of the energy dome, Zarathik felt the electromagnetic field hit her like a physical blow. Her environmental suit's electronics died instantly, leaving them with only basic life support and communication between their helmets. Still with me? Marcus's voice crackled through the suit-to-suit radio. Barely, she gasped. The energy field felt like insects crawling under her scales. But her Veltar physiology was handling it better than expected. My scales are dispersing some of the interference. How are you managing? Human stubborn refusal to die, Marcus replied, though she could hear the strain in his voice. Plus, I prepared for this. He showed her modifications he'd made to his suit, a mesh of copper wiring woven through the fabric that was channeling the worst of the electromagnetic energy away from his body. It was crude but effective. They moved carefully through the colony streets, avoiding the strongest energy currents that Marcus tracked using a simple compass, one of the few instruments that still functioned in the interference. Around them, they could see trapped colonists through building windows, conscious but unable to move far from their shelters. The energy levels are higher near the device, Zarathik observed. How are we going to get close enough to stop it? Same way humans always solve impossible problems, we break them down into smaller possible problems. Marcus pointed to the alien structure ahead. Look at the base of the device. See those crystalline formations? They're channeling energy from the planet's core to power the terraforming field. Zarathik squinted through the interference. If we destroy the crystals, the device loses power and the dome collapses. But there's a problem. Those crystals are designed to be indestructible by conventional means. And even if we could damage them, the feedback would probably kill anyone within a kilometer. They crept closer using abandoned buildings for cover. As they approached the device, Zarathik could see it more clearly. The alien technology was beautiful in a terrifying way. Organic curves merged with crystalline structures, all pulsing with energy that made the air itself seem alive. Wait, Marcus said suddenly, grabbing her arm. Look at the energy flow patterns. Zarathik followed his gaze. The energy wasn't flowing randomly. It was following specific pathways through the crystal matrix like water flowing through carefully designed channels. It's a network, she breathed. The whole thing is connected, exactly, and networks have vulnerabilities. Marcus was studying the patterns intently. See that smaller crystal cluster on the eastern side? It's a junction point where multiple energy streams converge. If we could disrupt the flow there, the entire network would become unstable. Zarathik finished. But how do we disrupt something that powerful without getting killed in the process? Marcus smiled, and she recognized the expression. He'd figured out something the designers hadn't expected. We use the fact that I'm human and you're Veltar. Separately, neither of us could survive what we need to do. Together, he explained his plan quickly. The energy flowing through the network created a resonance pattern like a musical note played across the entire crystal structure. If they could introduce a counter-resonance at exactly the right frequency, the network would tear itself apart. You want us to sing to it? Zarathik stared at him. Not sing, harmonize. Veltar vocal cords can produce frequencies humans can't, and humans can sustain tones that would damage Veltar throats. If we work together, we can create a harmonic frequency that disrupts the network's resonance. That's insane. It's also the only plan that doesn't require equipment we don't have. Marcus checked his suit readings, but we'll have to get within 10 meters of the junction crystal. The energy levels there will be intense enough to kill us if we're exposed for more than a few minutes. Zarathik thought about all the colonists trapped in their homes, about the expanding dome that would soon threaten entire worlds, about her father's trust in their ability to find solutions others couldn't see. Then we'd better get it right the first time. They spent precious minutes calculating the exact frequencies needed. Using the harmonic mathematics Marcus had learned during his engineering training, and the vocal techniques Zarathik had studied as part of her royal education. It was an impossible combination of science and art, desperation and hope. The approach to the junction crystal was harrowing. The energy field grew stronger with each step, making their suits spark and their vision blur. Marcus's modified shielding began to fail, and Zarathik's scales started to smoke where the energy was strongest. Almost there, Marcus gasped, his voice tight with pain. Remember, we start with the fundamental frequency and build the harmonic slowly. If we rush it, the feedback will kill us before we can complete the pattern. They reached the crystal just as Zarathik's suit began to fail completely. The energy was so intense now that it was visible, crackling around them like lightning trapped in a bottle. Now, Marcus shouted. They began to vocalize together, Marcus producing the lower frequencies while Zarathik's naturally different vocal structure generated the higher harmonics. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The alien device continued its steady pulsing, indifferent to their efforts. But then the crystal began to vibrate. It's working, Zarathik called out, maintaining her part of the harmonic pattern despite the pain coursing through her body. The resonance is building. The vibration spread from their target crystal to the others in the network. What had been a stable energy flow became chaotic as competing frequencies tore through the system. Cracks appeared in the crystalline structures, spreading like spider webs across the device's surface. Keep going, Marcus urged, though his voice was becoming hoarse. Just a few more seconds. The entire alien device began to shake violently. Energy arcs danced between the crystals as the network fought to maintain stability against the harmonic interference they were creating. The sound of their combined voices, amplified by the crystal resonance, became a song of destruction, that tore at the very foundations of the terraforming system. With a sound like breaking glass magnified 1,000-fold, the junction crystal shattered. The cascade failure was immediate and spectacular. One by one, the other crystals in the network overloaded and exploded, sending showers of alien material across the colony. The energy dome flickered and collapsed, and the green lightning in the sky began to dissipate. Marcus and Zarathic collapsed beside the ruins of the device, their suits finally failing completely as the electromagnetic interference faded. They lay on the ground, breathing hard, watching as normal sunlight began to filter through the clearing atmosphere. "Did we do it?" Zarathic asked weakly. Marcus managed a tired smile. "The electromagnetic readings are dropping to normal levels. The colonists should be able to restore power within hours." He reached over and took her hand. "We did it. Together." As rescue teams began emerging from the colony buildings, Zarathic realized that something fundamental had changed. Not just the crisis they'd resolved, but her understanding of what it meant to be worthy. Her father had valued strength and tradition. The council had measured worth through trials and bloodline. But lying here beside Marcus, having just saved thousands of lives through cooperation and innovation, she understood that true worth came from the willingness to stand together against impossible odds. "Marcus," she said softly. "Yeah? When we get back to the capital, I want to propose something to the council. Something that's going to change everything." Marcus squeezed her hand. "I'm listening. I want to establish an exchange program between our species. Veltar learning human innovation, humans learning Veltar endurance. Not just diplomatic exchanges, but real partnerships." She turned to look at him. "What we just did, that's only possible when different strengths work together. You think the council will approve it?" Zarathic smiled, thinking about her father's words after Marcus completed the trials. "I think it's time to show them that the future belongs to those who can adapt." As their rescue shuttle descended through the clearing skies, she knew this was just the beginning of something much larger than either of them had imagined. 1 year later, Princess Zarathic stood before the Galactic Council on the neutral station of Harmony Prime, representing not just the Veltar Empire but the new human Veltar Alliance. The assembly hall was packed with representatives from dozens of species, all eager to hear about the partnership that had revolutionized 2 civilizations. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying the confidence that had grown from a year of successful innovations and diplomatic breakthroughs. "A year ago I was marked as unworthy by my own people. Today I stand before you as proof that worthiness cannot be measured by adherence to tradition alone." In the audience, Marcus watched his wife with pride. She had grown into her role as Alliance ambassador, combining Veltar strength with the adaptive thinking she'd learned from human culture. Her scales gleamed with health and confidence, and the space where her mark of shame had once been now bore a new symbol, the intertwined spirals representing the alliance between their species. "The crisis at Xerion 4 taught us that the challenges facing our galaxy require more than any single species can provide," Zarathic continued. "The alien terraforming device was built by the extinct Cathara race, a species that destroyed itself through rigid adherence to a single way of thinking." She activated a holographic display, showing the recovered alien technology. "Our analysis revealed that the Cathara had the knowledge to create wonders, but they lacked the flexibility to adapt when their methods proved insufficient. They built terraforming devices to reshape worlds, but when those devices began malfunctioning across their empire, they couldn't conceive of solutions outside their traditional approaches." Ambassador Thisra of the Kethmar delegation raised her serpentine head. "You suggest that innovation alone could have saved them?" "I suggest that the combination of knowledge and adaptability is what creates lasting civilizations," Zarathic replied. "In the past year, the Human Veltar Alliance has implemented programs that showcase this principle." She gestured to the viewing gallery where a mixed group of young humans and Veltar sat together. "Our Exchange Academy has produced hybrid solutions to problems that stumped both our species individually. Human students learning Veltar endurance techniques are pushing the boundaries of deep space exploration. Veltar students studying human innovation have developed new approaches to resource management that have increased agricultural yields by 40% across our territories." Marcus stood to address the assembly. "The strength of our alliance isn't in one species dominating another. but in each contributing what they do best. Humans bring adaptability and creative problem-solving. Veltar brings strength, endurance, and institutional knowledge. Together, we're accomplishing things neither could achieve alone. General Korthax, who had initially opposed the marriage, now served as military liaison to the alliance. "I confess I was skeptical," he said, his gravelly voice carrying across the hall. "I believed strength was measured only in combat prowess and traditional honor. But watching Princess Zarathik and Captain Chen work together during the Zirion crisis changed my understanding." He paused, his expression thoughtful. "True strength isn't just the ability to destroy your enemies. It's the ability to protect your people by any means necessary, even if those means challenge everything you thought you knew." The Kithara device crisis had sparked a galaxy-wide examination of other extinct civilizations. Archaeological teams led by human Veltar partnerships had discovered dozens of failed colonies where advanced species had destroyed themselves through inflexibility. "We've identified a pattern," Zarathik explained, showing data from their research. "Civilizations that isolate themselves, that believe their way is the only way, consistently fail when faced with unexpected challenges. Those that adapt, that learn from others, that combine different approaches, those are the ones that survive and thrive." She looked directly at the camera broadcasting to billions across the galaxy. "This isn't about humans or Veltar being superior to anyone else. It's about recognizing that diversity of thought and approach is our galaxy's greatest strength." The Altarian delegate, a crystalline being whose species had remained neutral in most galactic affairs, spoke up. "Your alliance has shown impressive results, but how do we know this cooperation model will work between species with fundamentally different values?" Marcus and Zarathik exchanged a look, and she smiled slightly. "Delegate Christhall raises an excellent point. Marcus and I come from species that measure worth in completely different ways. Veltar traditionally values strength, honor, and adherence to proven methods. Humans value adaptability, innovation, and individual achievement. When we first met," Marcus added, "it would have been easy to assume we had nothing in common. But we discovered that underneath our different approaches, we shared the same fundamental goal: protecting and improving the lives of our people." Zarathik nodded. "The key isn't eliminating our differences. It's finding ways to make those differences complementary. When I was marked as unworthy, I thought my value system was wrong. Marcus helped me see that it wasn't wrong, just different, and that difference was exactly what our species needed." Emperor Velthak, who had traveled to Harmony Prime for this historic session, stood to address the assembly. His massive form commanded attention as he spoke. "My daughter's marriage to Captain Chen was initially seen as a desperate political alliance," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered star systems. "I now understand it was the first step in the evolution of our civilization." He turned to look at Zarathik with obvious pride. "Princess Zarathik, you have brought more honor to our family and our empire than any conquest ever could. You have shown us that true strength lies not in domination, but in the courage to grow beyond our limitations." The Galactic Council session concluded with the ratification of the Harmony Accords, a framework for interspecies cooperation based on the human Veltar model. Dozens of civilizations committed to exchange programs, joint research initiatives, and collaborative defense agreements. As delegates filed out of the assembly hall, Zarathik and Marcus found themselves alone on the observation deck, looking out at the stars where their respective fleets maintained a joint patrol. "Do you think it will work?" Zarathik asked. "All these different species trying to cooperate instead of compete?" Marcus put his arm around her shoulders. "Some will succeed, some will fail. But the ones that do succeed will be stronger than anything we've seen before." He smiled. "Besides, we've proven that impossible things become possible when the right people work together." Zarathik leaned against him, feeling the steady warmth of his presence. "You know, when I was young, I used to dream about finding my place in the universe. I thought it would involve grand battles or ancient trials. And instead I found it by learning to see through someone else's eyes." She looked up at him. "You taught me that honor isn't about following tradition perfectly. It's about having the courage to do what's right, even when it means creating new traditions." Marcus kissed her forehead gently. "And you taught me that strength isn't just about solving problems. Sometimes it's about enduring long enough for the right solution to emerge." As they watched the mixed fleet Patrol, human ships with their adaptive designs flying alongside Veltar vessels with their imposing strength. Zarathic realized that her father had been wrong about one thing. She hadn't gained honor through her human husband. She had found the honor that was always within her, waiting for someone who could see it clearly enough to help her recognize it herself. The galaxy was changing, growing, learning to see strength in diversity rather than uniformity, and at the heart of that change was a simple truth that Marcus had shown her on their first day together. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose to see others not as they appear to be, but as they have the potential to become. The stars stretched endlessly before them, full of challenges and opportunities that would require every kind of strength the galaxy's species could offer. But for the first time in her life, Zarathic faced that infinite future without fear. After all, she wasn't facing it alone.